I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. And we are here, a bonus episode, just a few days away from the Oscar nominations. In this video, I'm going to give my predictions for all 23 categories. And if you're new to this channel, this is what we've been leading up to ever since October, ever since 8 years ago, where I did my first season in 2016. We've been covering the Oscars, trying to predict what's going to happen. Every single week I've been picking a different Oscar category and doing a deep dive, a full video on a certain category, even the technical ones, documentary, visual effects. So if you want to hear more in-depth of my thoughts, go check out those videos. But this is still going to be the master one, the one that gives my final predictions. I'm not going to go, 20 minutes into each category. That would be, of course, too long. But I will give some explanation and thought as to why I went with one movie over another. As always, if you appreciate the video, comment below, let me know your predictions, your thoughts. You guys have been super supportive this year, commenting below my videos, lots of interactions. I love to see that. This has been one of our most successful Oscar years, and that's because of you guys, because we're, crafting this little great corner of the internet, talking about the Oscars. That's the reason why I do these videos, and then of course to help you with your Oscar predictions, because I do the deep dives, because I do the research and the analytics. We get consistently, year over year, you can check out my other videos, year over year, highly accurate, highly ranked on Gold Derby predictions for the Oscars. And if you want to hear my thoughts on specific categories, look at the timestamps in the descriptions below, or just check the comments. I'll have my full predictions in a list form if you don't want to hear my thoughts. But without further ado, this is going to be a long one, so let's jump into things. Starting off with Best Picture, my predictions are Oppenheimer, Poor Things, The Holdovers, Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, Anatomy of a Fall, Maestro, American Fiction, Past Lives, and The Zone of Interest. This lineup is exactly the PGA lineup in the Producers Guild Awards. They're very accurate at predicting what's going to get nominated for Best Picture. They don't always go 10 for 10, but that's because they usually go with more populist American movies, like they've done Wonder Woman in the past, or Deadpool, or Knives Out. But this year, the fact that they've gone with two international movies in Anatomy of a Fall and The Zone of Interest indicates that those have a lot of support as well in the States, in America, as of course they do internationally. So I'd be very surprised if it's not that top 10. That's pretty chalk, but I think those are pretty obvious 10 for this year. Then Best Actress, I have Emma Stone for Poor Things, Lily Gladstone for Killers of the Flower Moon, Carey Mulligan for Maestro, Sandra Hüller for Anatomy of a Fall, and Margot Robbie for Barbie. And there may be a surprise here, but I don't know what that is. I essentially took the 5 that got nominated at SAG, replaced Annette Bening for Sandra Hüller, because SAG does not like performances not in the English language. They didn't nominate Penelope Cruz when she got nominated for Parallel Mothers. They didn't nominate Antonio Banderas when he got nominated for Pain and Glory. So, and Sandra Hüller just got nominated at BAFTA, both in actress and supporting. So there's a lot of support for her, and she's gotten in everywhere else. So I'm confident that Hüller will replace Annette Bening there. And then I thought of maybe replacing someone like a Margot Robbie for a Greta Lee in Past Lives. But Margot got in at BAFTA as, I assume, a jury choice. So that indicates still a lot of passion for her. And she got in at BAFTA. She got in at SAG and Critics' Choice and the Globes. She's gotten in everywhere. She's the face of one of the most popular movies of the year, and a movie that I think is going to get a lot of nominations. We could see a surprise on Oscar morning, but I don't think that would be logical to predict that, just because Robbie has gotten in everywhere. So I went pretty standard with my 5. There could be a surprise, but I'm still happy with it. Best Actor, I have Cillian Murphy for Oppenheimer, Paul Giamatti for The Holdovers, Bradley Cooper, Maestro, Jeffrey Wright, American Fiction, and Colman Domingo in Rustin. My top 3 are pretty locks. They've been gotten nominated everywhere. The 4th slot, I went with Jeffrey Wright in American Fiction, because despite not getting in at BAFTA, he got in everywhere else, SAG, Critics' Choice, and some of those American bodies were more predominantly American than, say, something like BAFTA, like SAG and Critics' Choice. They liked American Fiction a lot, even going to nominate his co-star, Sterling K. Brown, Best Supporting Actor. So I'm not concerned that Jeffrey Wright will get nominated here despite missing at BAFTA. And then in my final slot, I went with Colman Domingo for Rustin. And I was thinking about maybe doing Leonardo DiCaprio. I think you can make an easy argument that, oh, Colman Domingo, he was a jury pick at the Globes, and he got in at SAG because of the Netflix factor, because they like Netflix movies. But he's gotten in everywhere, and we can't deny that. Critics' Choice, Globes, BAFTA, and SAG, that's a strong support for that movie. And then the movie itself is very Oscar-friendly, biopic, true story, a very central performance from Colman Domingo. He's the best part of the movie. And then also, there hasn't been a Best Actor lineup since 2013 in which all 5 of the actors had their movie nominated for Best Picture. And if I had Leo in here, well, then all 5 would have their movies nominated for Best Picture, most likely. Because, you know, the actors don't necessarily need to love your movie, they need to love your performance, which is why, you know, we see a movie like Brendan Fraser win for The Whale, even though The Whale wasn't nominated for Best Picture. Or going back, Viggo Mortensen in Captain Fantastic, or some of these kind of people that get in at the last second. Their movies aren't necessarily beloved or nominated for Best Picture. And I think Colman Domingo, he's gotten in everywhere. He's delivered a great performance. He's doing a lot of campaigning as well. He's been out doing Q&As, going to parties. That has been evident. So I think his success at the other award shows, plus his campaigning, plus that sort of stat that not since 2013 has all 5 of the actors had their movie nominated for Best Picture. And Leo maybe sort of being the boring choice, and Martin Scorsese, his last movie, The Irishman, didn't get his lead, Robert De Niro, in that movie nominated, so maybe there's just something with the lead aspect of it. So I think Leo's going to miss out for Colman Domingo. Then Best Supporting Actress, I have Divine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers, Emily Blunt for Oppenheimer, Danielle Brooks for The Color Purple, Jodie Foster for NYAD, and Julianne Moore for May December. So the top 3 have gotten in pretty much everywhere. I could see maybe a surprise miss for someone like Danielle Brooks, just because her movie has lost a lot of steam, and we thought at one point maybe be a Best Picture contender, that being The Color Purple, but right now it doesn't seem, maybe it only gets 1 nomination at the Oscars. So I'm concerned about that, but I still think she gets in, because Supporting Actress is a little bit of a weaker category. Then in the 4th slot, I went with Jodie Foster for NYAD, because this movie does have a secretly strong amount of acting support. Of course, Annette Bening and Jodie Foster got in at SAG. And the movie also got longlisted at BAFTA, both Annette and Jodie Foster, so it indicates that there still is some international support along with the sort of American support. Jodie Foster is a 2-time winner, well-liked member of the Academy, and has been getting in pretty much everywhere. So I do think that particularly the American branch of the Academy will throw the support behind NYAD, and particularly Jodie Foster. And then in my final slot, I went with Julianne Moore. And she didn't get nominated at SAG, she didn't get nominated at BAFTA, but she's been doing better than her May December co-stars, because at least she got longlisted at BAFTA, and did get in at Golden Globes, and did get in at Critics' Choice. So she's missed the industry awards, but I do think that May December will resonate with the Academy members specifically because of the meta element of the movie, because it's Todd Haynes. Todd Haynes, every time he gets nominated for screenplay, one of his actors also get nominated. But even if the movie doesn't get nominated for screenplay, he's also had performances like Cate Blanchett for I'm Not There get nominated from his films when that movie didn't get nominated for Best Screenplay. So there is a path where we still have Julianne Moore, a well-liked actress in a Todd Haynes movies. His movies get his actors nominated. It's a very big role when you think about the movie. She has a lot of screen time, so you think about her. It's a choice, just her idea of the lisp and her kind of strange way of going about things. I think actors will appreciate that, the acting branch of the Academy that is. And then I also think that Julianne Moore, let's not forget, in 2014 won an Oscar for Still Alice. And Still Alice had no other nominations and wasn't that critically well beloved. And she willed her way to an Oscar. We just love Julianne Moore so much that we gave her an Oscar because it was her time. We don't see that too often nowadays, but that just shows the support that people have and the love that people have for Julianne Moore. So I think I have a really great, beloved actor in a movie that's in the conversation, that has critical buzz, and she did get nominated at some of these critical groups and got, longlisted at BAFTA. She's not in the conversation. From a Todd Haynes movie that I think is going to get nominated for a screenplay. There's usually a correlation between screenplay and acting. A lot of things, I think, going for Julianne Moore's case. So despite not getting in at BAFTA or SAG, sometimes you got to predict surprises. You can't go 5 for 5. And, for SAG, for example, in every single category, you have to predict some surprises because they don't get everything right all the time. This one I went with Julianne Moore. Best Supporting Actor, I have Robert Downey Jr. for Oppenheimer, Ryan Gosling for Barbie, Robert De Niro, Killers of the Flower Moon, Willem Dafoe, Poor Things, and Mark Ruffalo, Poor Things. So the top 3 are locks. They've been getting in everywhere. We could see a surprise, but I'm not going to predict that. And then in the final 2 slots, I think you can go a whole bunch of ways, but I'm betting on Poor Things, and I'll tell you why. Number 1, Willem Dafoe did get in at SAG, so he is still well-liked. He's a very well-liked actor. He has a facial deformity in the movie. He's very much the sweetness, and I think in many ways the heart of the movie, in a movie that we expect to be very well-liked. So I think a really well-liked actor, multiple pastime nominee, who's gotten in at the Oscars more times than he's gotten in pretty much anywhere else in a movie that's really well-liked. That's one. Number two, every year since 2017, so 6 years in a row, we've had 2 performances from the same movie nominated in the same category. Yorgos Lanthimos' last movie, 2018, The Favourite, he had 2 supporting actress nominations. And, even in years when we don't think there's going to be a surprise, there is. And they'll put Lakeith Stanfield and Judas and the Black Messiah and Danielle Kaluuya in the same category for Best Supporting Actor. So the Academy, more than any other branch, likes nominating 2 performances from the same film in the same category. And then 3, even though they missed out at BAFTA, they still liked Poor Things. BAFTA actually, if you look at Poor Things, actually overperformed in some of the technical nominations. And if you know how BAFTA's acting categories work, what they do is they do this sort of jury system where the top 3 get in based on votes, and then the next 3 are picked amongst a group of 20 or so people. So there's a reason why I think Robert Downey Jr. and Robert De Niro and Ryan Gosling, they got in at BAFTA because they're probably the top 3 vote getters, which is why they're the top 3 predictions in my video. But then also, the other 3, the other predictions that they made were kind of a little bit more strange, and I don't think they're going to contend for Oscars like Jacob Elordi in Saltburn. So then I went, okay, well, they still liked Poor Things, and the only reason why they didn't get in at BAFTA is probably because they didn't get saved by the jury. But at the Oscars, they don't have this jury system. So we know Poor Things is a well-liked movie. It has some support in terms of acting. Ruffalo's a past nominee. So is Willem Dafoe. Well-liked actors, very different performances. They like to nominate 2 performances from the same film. It just made too much sense for me. And I still felt like they're going to do that 2 performances of the same film thing again. And it makes sense to go with these 2 performances in a movie that's so well-liked. Then my predictions for Best Director. I have Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer, Martin Scorsese for Killers of the Flower Moon, Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things, Jonathan Glazer, The Zone of Interest, and Alexander Payne, The Holdovers. Now, don't look at any other award show when you're predicting Best Director. All you have to look at is the Directors Guild of America. Because 9 out of the last 10 years, they've gotten 4 out of the 5 correct. That means every single year, 4 out of the 5 DGA nominees get nominated at the Oscars. So the question then becomes, okay, look at the DGA 5, pick one director that you don't think is going to get in, and replace it with another director. And if you've been following the Oscars over the past few years, every year they like to pick the most populist Hollywood director and replace them with the European auteur. Denis Villeneuve gets replaced out for Ryusuke Hamaguchi. Last year, Joseph Kosinski gets replaced for Ruben Östlund, the Hollywood director for the European auteur. Okay, so the European auteur this year, I think, is going to be Jonathan Glazer. He's a well-known brand name. His last movie, Under the Skin, was received as one of the best sci-fi movies of the 2010s. So he's made many good movies in the past, Birth and Sexy Beast. So he's well-liked and well-beloved in a movie that's all directing, his choice, his camera movement, the editing, the pace, not a lot of dialogue. It's very much a take and a directing achievement from Glazer, a European auteur. So I think he gets in. And then, of course, you have to ask yourself, well, who loses out? And when you look at the movies that get nominated at DGA that don't get nominated at the Oscars, Dune, The Martian, American Sniper, Top Gun Maverick. What's common about all these movies? They're populist Hollywood studio movies that made a bunch of money at the box office. Well, look at our DGA 5 this year. The one movie that fits that bill exactly is Barbie, Greta Gerwig. She's the populist Hollywood director this year. And the Directors Guild is a little bit snobby. They think, we're not going to nominate Joseph Kosinski because Top Gun Maverick made the most money out of all the movies. That was your reward. And I think a lot of people will think similarly with Greta Gerwig and go, you made Barbie. Yes, it's unique and different and your own, but also it's a big studio movie that made the most money at the box office. That's your reward. We're going to go with something a little bit more smaller this year. So that's why I went with my 5, replacing Greta Gerwig for Jonathan Glazer. We see this year over year. If you're not predicting at least one international director, I think you're going to be wrong. So I would highly consider you to reconsider your predictions and try to include at least one international director in there. Then Best Original Screenplay, I have The Holdovers, Anatomy of a Fall, Past Lives, Maestro, and May December. So the top three are strong Best Picture contenders where the writing is the focus of their movie. Then in my fourth slot, I went with Maestro because I think that even though some people don't consider this movie a writing achievement, it has been getting in everywhere. It is going to get nominated for Best Picture. And the alternatives would be something like Air or Saltburn. And those are two movies that, if they get in for Screenplay, would be their only Oscar nominations. So I'm not going to predict Air or Saltburn to get in over a movie like Maestro, because Maestro, I think, will get in based on the success of the movie. I think people will like the movie enough to nominate it. It's also from Bradley Cooper, who got nominated for A Star is Born last time he directed a movie. He also co-wrote it with Josh Singer, who is a Oscar winner for Screenplay, so well-respected in his own right. And then in my final slot, I went with May December, because I had that Julianne Moore nomination, but also because the New York Film Critics Circle Best Screenplay Award went to May December. And if you look at the New York Film Critics Circle Best Screenplay winners for the past 15 years, 12 out of the last 15 winners also got nominated for at least a Screenplay Award at the Oscars. They didn't always win, but they always got nominated. 12 out of the last 15 winners of that critics group got nominated at the Oscars. That's a really strong stat, so I thought May December made a lot of sense there. It's got a lot of critic prizes, and this category and this branch, the writers of the Academy, usually line up in their tastes more similarly to critics versus, say, the Costume Designers Guild, who just care about if the costumes are good. They don't care if the movie's good. Screenplay, they do lean and have similar tastes to the critics, so I do think May December will get in for original screenplay. Best adapted screenplay, I have Barbie, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, American Fiction, and Killers of the Flower Moon. This is an easy 5 for me. They're all Best Picture nominees. Killers of the Flower Moon missed out at BAFTA, but that movie sort of underperformed there. I think it will resonate with the American branch of the Academy more, enough to get in here, because Martin Scorsese is maybe the greatest American filmmaker of all time, so we'll respect him and the fact that he wrote this movie alongside Eric Roth, who is a past-time winner and multiple-time nominee and very well-respected writer as well. So I do think it's going to be chalk and basic, and this 5 will get nominated. I wouldn't want you to overthink this category. This is probably going to be the 5. Then Best Animated Feature, I have Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, The Boy and the Heron, Nimona, Elemental, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So going pretty chalk here. I think the top 2 are pretty much locks. They've been getting in everywhere. Then I had Nimona, which dominated at the Annies, the Animation Guild, their awards. Got a lot of nominations there from Netflix as well, who's been doing very well, really since they've had an animation studio back in 2019, surprising last year with The Sea Beast, surprising the year before that with Over the Moon, of course had Klaus and Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. They've had a lot of success at this branch within the Academy, so Nimona is their sort of big Netflix animated movie of the year. I went with Elemental because despite getting not nominated at the Annies, did get nominated at BAFTA and Critics' Choice and Golden Globes, and is an original Pixar movie. And pretty much since the inception of this category, every original Pixar movie has gotten nominated. Pretty much every single one. They don't like the sequels as much or the spin-offs, but they love the original one. So even though it isn't the most critically acclaimed movie, it would be very rare for an original Pixar movie to not get nominated. So I would ultimately still went with Elemental. And then in my final slot, I went with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because it got in at the Annies, but also got in at the Producers Guild. So those are 2 industry support animation nominations that it got, and it has the sort of high-low elements that this branch really likes. It's broad and appealing and entertaining, so they'll still like it. You know, a lot of people will still like it, but also has a very unique art style, comic book friendly, kind of Spider-Verse adjacent, but also it is very funny and critically well acclaimed. So it's a different movie within the potential nominees. So I do feel pretty confident in that top 5 for animation. Best cinematography, I have Oppenheimer, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest. I think those top 4 are pretty much locked. They all got in at ASC and BAFTA. And ASC isn't always 5 for 5 correct every single year, but they're pretty close, either 4 for 5 or 5 for 5. The movie that got nominated at ASC, aside from those 4, was El Conde. But that movie I just don't think has been seen enough. It also didn't get nominated at BAFTA, whereas The Zone of Interest did. So I wanted to lean a movie that's a little bit more well-liked, so I went with a movie like The Zone of Interest. And generally, you'll see throughout my predictions, I usually over-index the international movies and try to nominate them if I'm unsure of something, go with the international movie, like A Zone of Interest, like Anatomy of a Fall, because like I've mentioned throughout these past few months, the Academy has gotten increasingly international over these past years, and we see the international movies overperform at award shows like the Oscars. And it's from two-time nominee Lucas Sal, and this branch does like to nominate the same people over and over again, so that's a positive sign for that movie as well. Best documentary feature, I have 20 Days in Mariupol, Beyond Utopia, Four Daughters, American Symphony, and The Eternal Memory. And the documentary category is very difficult to predict every year because we have so many precursors. Now, I did a full video on this category because it's very complex, and you have IDAs and Cinema Eyes and a whole bunch of groups that you have to look at. So if you want to hear my thoughts more in depth, check out that video. But basically, 20 Days in Mariupol has gotten a lot of the important frontrunners. I'm confident that it will get nominated. Same thing with Beyond Utopia and Four Daughters. Beyond Utopia has the political element too, and this group does like the political films. Four Daughters is an international doc. Same thing with 20 Days in Mariupol, which has been showing up in a lot of places, and they usually like to nominate more international movies rather than American movies, particularly in this branch. Then American Symphony I have in the 4th slot. I know a lot of people have it in the 1st slot, which it makes sense because I think if it does get in, it's probably going to win. But these types of movies don't always get nominated, these kind of autobiography type movies. This style of movie doesn't really get that well respected within this particular branch at the Academy, which is why I don't have Still, the Michael J. Fox movie, getting in. Despite getting in a lot of precursors, every year we see, Won't You Be My Neighbor and Apollo 11, and these well-liked American documentaries sometimes not always get in, and it's usually the more autobiographical celebrity-focused movies. So I'm a little bit concerned about American Symphony, but it still got in at those precursors, a lot of them as a matter of fact, and it got overperformed in terms of the amount of at the Oscar shortlists. It got in a lot of categories that I didn't think it would get in. I don't think they're going to get nominated for an Oscars, but it just shows that there's an indicative wide support for the movie, and it's from Netflix, and Netflix almost always has a movie nominated in this category, and they've done very well over the years in terms of nominations. And then my final slot, I went with The Eternal Memory, which is being distributed by MTV Documentaries, who has a track record of getting their documentaries nominated and seen, so I'm not worried about visibility. Another international film with a lot of those important precursors that it got as well. So I wanted to lean international more than American because they pretty rarely go, 4 or 5 American movies. They usually like to intersperse this with international documentaries. So The Eternal Memory, and I think also The Eternal Memory is different enough than some of the other nominees that will make it stand out. Then my predictions for Best Costume Design, I have Poor Things, Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, and Maestro. So the top 3 are locked. And then my next 2 predictions I did in conjunction with the Best Production Design category, because if you're not following along the costume design category and the production design category, you may think have a lot of overlap in terms of their nominees. They don't. They usually average about 2 out of the 5, 3 out of the 5 overlapping. So I'd be hesitant to go with a movie like Oppenheimer because I have it in production design, or go with Napoleon in production design and costume design. So I went with Napoleon here just in costume design because it got in at BAFTA, whereas production design, it didn't get in at BAFTA, despite both movies being long-listed. Same thing happened with the Critics' Choice Awards. It got nominated in a very pivotal category, Best Period, at the Costume Designers Guild. Janet Yates is a pastime nominee and winner, so this category also really likes nominating the same people over and over again. So it has a lot of things going for it. I do think costume design over production design, Napoleon will get in. And then I went with Maestro in my final slot. And that was because I didn't want to have overlap with production design. That was important to me. But also it's from Mark Bridges, who was a pastime nominee and past winner. And like I mentioned, this group likes to nominate the same people over and over again. So that's a positive on that side. But also it's got a lot of dresses and suits and a period piece and is a well-liked movie. And, it's not insane to think, this period piece that chronicles a lot of different periods with dresses and suits that are accurate will be nominated. Best Picture nomination, flashy costumes, not going to get nominated. Production design from a past winner, that was enough for me. Best production design, I have Poor Things, Barbie, Oppenheimer, Killers of the Flower Moon, and The Zone of Interest. And the top 3 have been getting in everywhere, same thing with costume design, so there's the overlap there. And then my 4th slot here was Oppenheimer. Well, I guess it kind of really more in the 3rd slot, but 3rd, 4th slot, Oppenheimer. because Christopher Nolan's movies almost always get nominated for Best Production Design, and the movie itself has been getting nominated at pretty much every important precursor. And then in my final slot, I did go with The Zone of Interest, which, despite not getting nominated at the Art Directors Guild, did get nominated at BAFTA. And when I make my predictions, of course, I didn't want to overlap with costumes. And I thought of the movie, which is a likely Best Picture nominee, has the house that they built, and it's very much about place and where you are and your location. So I thought that it was a very, when you think about the movie, you think about the design and the house and the production design of the movie. So it made a lot of sense to predict it. Despite not getting the Guild support, it does, I think, make sense to me as a viewer, but also that BAFTA nomination made enough sense to me to push it over the edge. Best Makeup and Hairstyling, I have Maestro, Poor Things, Oppenheimer, Golda, and Killers of the Flower Moon. Maestro and Poor Things are Best Picture nominees that have prosthetics on main characters in Bradley Cooper and Willem Dafoe, two people that I think will get nominated at the Oscars, and this branch and this group loves prosthetics more so than they like, achievements in hairstyling, so I wanted to nominate those two. Then I had Oppenheimer, because I think the support of it being the frontrunner for Best Picture will get it nominated in some of these categories, like makeup, where does it have really notable makeup and hairstyling? Not really, but the movie's really well liked, so that makes sense there. And if you think about it, Robert Downey Jr.'s character does have unique hairstyle, and there is the old age makeup at the end of the film, so there is still some prosthetics going on there, and I think that the support of the movie ultimately, though, will push it over the edge. I had Golda, which I predicted in my initial video, which nobody had, but over time has revealed itself to be a major contender, getting longlisted at BAFTA, getting nominated at the Makeup and Hairstyling Awards. We usually have one movie that no one's ever heard of that is critically maligned, that still gets in because it's got great makeup work. This year it's Golda, another movie with very interesting prosthetics, transforming Helen Mirren and Liev Schreiber. And then in my final slot, I went with Killers of the Flower Moon because it got in at BAFTA, and some of the other alternatives didn't make a lot of sense to me. Society of the Snow got in nowhere. Last Voyage of the Demeter got in nowhere. Napoleon got in at BAFTA, but I don't think Napoleon's going to overperform at the Oscars. It does seem like more of a European appreciative movie. It did very well at the box office over there, so that's why I got nominated at BAFTA. And more so a movie of hairstyling than it is a movie of makeup and prosthetics, and this branch loves the prosthetics. And Killers of the Flower Moon does make sense because it did get nominated at BAFTA, and it has Leo and his fake teeth, and that's a prosthetic work of a main character, so you think about it a lot. So I do think that will be enough, and it just being the most well-liked movie versus a Last Voyage of the Demeter, for example, I think will ultimately be a deciding factor. Best Score, I have Oppenheimer, Killers of the Flower Moon, Poor Things, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and Barbie. So the top three are pretty obvious and have been getting in everywhere. Then in my fourth slot, I have Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse because it has also been getting in everywhere. The reason why I'm a little bit hesitant is because this branch likes to nominate the same people over and over again, and Daniel Pemberton has never been nominated for an Oscar. That being said, he's been nominated for Critics' Choice Awards, and he's been nominated for Golden Globes, and he's done a lot of scores, and I do think he's well respected, and he has been campaigning and doing Q&As for this movie. It's a very notable score. Animated movies most recently have been doing very well at getting nominated, whether it be Encanto or Soul. We do have a good track record of animated movies getting nominated, so I wouldn't be surprised if Spider-Verse got in. So even though he's not a past nominee, and they usually like this, past nominees, it's been getting in everywhere. It's an animated movie. They love animated scores, and Daniel Pemberton is still enough kind of an industry veteran and has done enough scores, and I think has built enough respect to get him his first nomination. And then in my final slot, I went with Barbie, and I really wanted to go with a movie from a composer who's been nominated before. So I almost went with Indiana Jones for John Williams, but that movie, it really has gone in nowhere, and you don't really see surprise John Williams scores that often, aside from something like a Star Wars score. Even though he's very well nominated, of course, he usually has at least one or two precursors, John Williams does, before getting nominated, so I was too concerned to go with that. Elemental hasn't been getting in a lot of places. I know I predicted that at one point, so I went with Barbie because Andrew Wyatt and Mark Ronson did the score, and Andrew Wyatt has won an Oscar before in the song category, not in Best Score, but at least he's a past nominee, and it's a movie that's well-liked, and this is going to sound a little bit silly, but I looked at my predictions, and I wanted Barbie to have 9 or 10 nominations, and in my first go-around, it only had 7, and I felt, that's weird. It got 14 nominations at Critics' Choice. It's going to get in, probably closer to 9 or 10 at the Oscars. It can get 14 at Critics' Choice. So I just felt like Barbie's a movie that has 9 or 10 nominations come Oscar morning. So I wanted to fit it in somewhere, and this made a lot of sense. So it's not very scientific, but I do think it makes a lot of sense. If you look through your predictions and you don't have this tunnel vision to each one, you try to have a holistic perspective of it, you would see that maybe Poor Things has 13 nominations. And then you have to ask yourself, is it really a movie that's going to be the most nominated at the Oscars? Is it really that beloved? I'm unsure, especially because you look at other movies. At one point, I had The Holdovers only having, I think it was 4 nominations. I was like, that's not going to happen. It's going to get more than that. And then I adjusted my predictions accordingly in smart senses. I'm not predicting The Holdovers in insane categories, but in smart, calculated areas. For example, like score, it does make sense to somewhat adjust your predictions to try to have a holistic understanding. Because at the end of the day, at least what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to get 100% right. I'm not trying to hedge my bets or anything. I'm trying to do the best I possibly can. So I went with Barbie, and I took a chance. Best original song, I have What Was I Made For from Barbie, Road to Freedom from Rustin, Fire Inside, Flamin' Hot, American Symphony, It Never Went Away, and I'm Just Ken for Barbie. I went pretty chalk here. I'm concerned I'm Just Ken misses because they don't like comedy songs, but it's been getting in everywhere and even won at the Critics' Choice Awards. I also had What Was I Made For from Barbie because that's been winning pretty much everywhere and is more of the traditional emotional ballad from pop stars. Then I had Road to Freedom for Rustin because we usually see a fight for a motivational justice song get nominated. This year it's going to be Rustin. Then I had The Fire Inside from Flamin' Hot because this is written by Diane Warren, and Diane Warren pretty much gets nominated every single year for movies that you've never heard of, and this is going to be that movie this year. And then I also went with Never Went Away from American Symphony because I think American Symphony has been a widely seen doc, Netflix, so it has the campaigning support, and I do think that this branch will like that. The star of the movie sung this song, so it's not just an end credit song at the end of a movie that no one even knows about. It is, at least a part of the movie from the main star of the movie, so there's some good interconnectivity there. Best sound, I have Oppenheimer, Maestro, Ferrari, The Zone of Interest, and Killers of the Flower Moon. So the top 3 have gotten in everywhere. The Motion Picture Sound Editors Guild, the Golden Reels, the Cinema Audio Society, and they also got in at BAFTA. So they've been getting in everywhere. I expect those 3 to get nominated. Then I went with The Zone of Interest because sound is such an important part of that movie. And I think if you're going to nominate for Best Picture, you really like the movie and you really appreciate that the sound is an important part of that movie. And it got nominated at BAFTA. And then Killers of the Flower Moon, I predicted because it got nominated at the MPSE and CAS, so it does have that guild support despite not getting nominated at BAFTA. And at the Sound Bake-Off, the showcase that they demonstrated was of the house blowing up from that movie. So you may think, Killers of the Flower Moon, that's weird, sound, you don't think about that movie. But if they showcase you the blowing up of that giant, house explosion, you're going to really think the sound's really amazing in that movie if you're reminded, oh yeah, that really is well done. And then when we think about this best sound category, we often see movies like Power of the Dog, movies that don't necessarily have obvious sound but are just best picture well-liked movies get nominated in some of these categories. I think Killers of the Flower Moon, because it will, I think, overperform in terms of nominations at the Academy versus, say, something like BAFTA, and is a well-liked best picture contender, I think it will get in for this category because it's just a well-liked movie. And this category, ever since it merged from sound editing and mixing into one category, they've liked sound editing movies, so more action movies, versus the sound mixing movies, which is more like Barbie because it's based on music. So they usually like the action, the editing over the mixing, the music. So I went with Killers of the Flower Moon over a movie like Barbie, which is more of maybe a sound mixing nominee, and they usually only nominate one of those per year, and that's Maestro this year. Best editing, I went with Oppenheimer, Killers of the Flower Moon, Anatomy of a Fall, The Holdovers, and Barbie. So Oppenheimer is a frontrunner to win for Best Picture. A 3-hour-long movie, highly edited, quick pace, well appreciated. Killers of the Flower Moon from legendary editor, 3-time winner Thelma Schoonmaker. A very long movie as well. They like those long movies and oftentimes reward long movies for editing. Then I had Anatomy of a Fall, which has been surging as of late and has been performing very well. It got nominated at editing at BAFTA. It is a movie that I expect to be very well liked within the Academy, and is a movie that has this tense pace of the dialogue scenes and going into the courtroom and to back home and the arguments. The tense nature of the movie, I think, will be associated with the quick editing, and the strong pace of the film will be associated with the editing. And then in my final two slots, I could have gone Holdovers, Barbie, or Poor Things, because they're all three movies that are very well liked, and in editing this category, they usually nominate movies that are Best Picture contenders, that have at least a chance of winning Best Picture. And you have to, choose which ones you think are going to get nominated, and this has no rhyme or reason why I went with the Holdovers and Barbie over Barbie or Poor Things or something. But basically, I looked at my predictions and I went, if I were to predict Poor Things in this category, I'd be predicting it for 12, maybe 13 nominations. That's too much for me. I think Poor Things is more of a 10, 11 nominated type of a movie. So to predict it for 13 times just didn't make a lot of sense. I don't think the Academy is going to love the movie that much. So I went with a movie like The Holdovers because this made it its 6th nomination. Barbie, this made it its 10th nomination. I thought about those totals. Just think about it. Oscar morning. Barbie gets 10, Poor Things gets 10 or 11, Holdovers gets 6. Those are just numbers, kind of make sense to me, which, someone with 8 years of Oscar predicting experience. And in a close call like this, where there's no obvious identifier, I ultimately went with Barbie and The Holdovers. Best visual effects, I went with The Creator, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Society of the Snow, and Godzilla -1. I wanted to take some swings here, throw some curveballs into the Oscar race. I felt I was going pretty basic for a lot of my predictions. This one I wanted to go off the reservoir. No Poor Things, no Mission Impossible. So I wanted to have some fun with it. But I'll tell you why. First of all, The Creator and Guardians of the Galaxy are pretty chalk because they've been getting in everywhere. Creator, very realistic VFX, and Guardians is a Marvel movie, and they almost always get nominated every year in VFX. Indiana Jones I went with because of the de-aging effects, which they usually appreciate in these movies. Past nominees like The Irishman and Blade Runner 2049 had very excellent de-aging effects. Then my other slot went to Society of the Snow because it got a lot of buzz at the Visual Effects Bake Off, and it's a movie with supporting VFX, and if you look, and it got nominated at the Visual Effects Society in terms of that category, the best supporting effects in a photoreal feature, which oftentimes we see movies like First Man, for example, get in because they like the characters of The Creator or Guardians of the Galaxy, the big CGI fests, but then they also like supporting VFX in a more traditional drama, and Society of the Snow has been surging released late in the season and has been getting a lot of buzz, so I do think it will get in here. And then Godzilla -1. I wanted to predict it in a sort of hope-dict way, but I think because it had a very strong performance at the VFX Bake Off, did get in for character design at Visual Effects Society, so it has some industry support there. And the director of the movie is actually going to be, if he gets nominated in this category, will be nominated. So it's not just the visual effects team, it's also the director. So it's kind of a secret way to, hey, if we nominate him here, we get to sort of support the movie as a whole. And I do think that this movie is well liked, and the appreciation of what they did with such a small budget on such a grand scale will be appreciated by these artists. And sometimes, we're going to lose out on Greta Gerwig for Barbie. We're going to lose out on some of, Zac Efron in The Iron Claw. The internet's going to have a lot of losses. I want to give the internet a little bit of one win. And I think, for as many bad nominations and as disappointing nominations that the Oscars may give us, sometimes they do give us some fun ones too. So I wanted to give us a little bit of hope and predict Godzilla -1 and maybe push it over the edge that way. But I do still think it is a serious contender. Then Best International Film, I have The Zone of Interest, Society of the Snow, 20 Days in Mariupol, The Taste of Things, and Totem. So Zone I have in here because I think it's going to get nominated for Best Picture, so it should get in for Best International Film. Society of the Snow I have because, like I mentioned just now, it's surging in popularity. It's from Netflix. Netflix usually has an international film nominated every single year from a well-known director in J.A. Bayona. Entertaining, exciting, true story, big budget. I think it will get in. I have 20 Days in Mariupol because the Academy loves to nominate documentaries in the documentary category, but also in the international feature category. It's not a coincidence that both 20 Days in Mariupol and Four Daughters got shortlisted at documentary, but also got shortlisted at the Best International Feature category. I think that's important to note. There is overlap between those two categories, and 20 Days in Mariupol is a well-liked movie, and it got in at BAFTA for international film, which indicates to me a lot of support. And then I have The Taste of Things because the Critics' Choice Awards are really usually pretty predictive at predicting the documentaries. They usually get about 3 out of the 6 of their documentary nominees show up at the Oscars. I already had Zone, I already had Society of the Snow, so I went with The Taste of Things, the critically acclaimed movie of the year from a big star in Juliette Binoche from France, which is a well-respected country in terms of these international films and of course cinema. Then in my final slot, I wanted to go with a non-European film because there hasn't been a year in the 21st century in which all 5 of the nominees went to every movie was from Europe. There's always a movie from Japan or from Tunisia or from Argentina or from other parts of the world. Particularly this branch of the Academy likes to reward movies from other cultures, not just European cultures. So I didn't go with Fallen Leaves. I didn't go with, another possible contender. I went ultimately with Totem. I could have gone with Totem or something like Perfect Days because that's from Japan, but it's not from a Japanese director, so I don't know if they're going to still see that as a European movie. So I'm with Totem, the Mexican entry for this year. It has some support, National Board of Review, Los Angeles Film Critics. There is, some critical support for the movie. It has been campaigned well, and, I wanted to go with a movie that was at least a contender, but then a contender that was not from Europe. Now, the short categories. I don't do a whole lot of analysis on the short categories because you can't do any analysis on them. They're really hard to predict. So I'm just going to do a little bit of analysis on them here. So Best Animated Short, I have Letter to a Pig, War is Over, inspired by the music of John and Yoko, Humo, Eva, and Pachyderm. So the lineup for the most part is mostly non-American. They don't usually always like to go with the Disney traditional cutesy type of a short. They like to go with usually more depressing international. Letter to a Pig is international depressing. War's Over is a Weta alum. Weta actually made it, and the picture and the director is a Pixar alum with lots of good press as well. Humo's stop motion, so a different style of animation. Eva, another interesting kind of animated movie. And then Pachyderm, which I think will connect with older voters and does have some critical acclaim. Best Documentary Short, I have Camp Courage, The Last Repair Shop, The ABCs of Book Banning, Deciding Vote, and If Dreams Were Lightning, The Rural Healthcare Crisis. Camp Courage, Netflix doc, they get nominated a bunch in this category because Netflix, it's very highly visible, so a lot of voters see it. ABCs of Book Banning is from Sheila Nevins, who has 32 Emmys, is very famous and very well connected. The Last Repair Shop is from Ben Proudfoot, who was nominated in 2022 and 21 and won in 2022. So well-liked past member of this category. And then I went with Deciding Vote because it's from The New Yorker, and The New Yorker pretty much every year I trust, and they almost always get nominated. And last year the same thing happened. I predicted 100 to 1 odds Stranger at the Gate because it was The New Yorker, and guess what? It got nominated. So I do think Deciding Vote will get in because it's on The New Yorker, and therefore it's just highly visible and easy to see. And then finally, I went with If Dreams Were Lightning, the Rural Healthcare Crisis, because we usually have some crazy, kooky title in these short categories, and I just thought that If Dreams Were Lightning was kind of a fun title, and they usually go with fun titles, and it's from PBS, so it has a lot of visibility too. And then in the Best Live Action Short category, I have The After, The Shepherd, The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, Yellow, and The Anne Frank Gift Shop. The After is a Netflix movie starring David Oyelowo, which is a big deal, major star, Netflix, highly visible. The Shepherd is produced by Alfonso Cuarón, which is a very well-liked, of course, member of the Academy, multiple-time Oscar winner. Last year he produced a short called Le Pupille, which got nominated as well, so he's done well in terms of producing shorts that get nominated at the Oscars. I'm not going to bet against that. The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar is Wes Anderson, another Netflix movie with a big star, highly easy to see, and I do think Wes Anderson is going to be well respected within the Academy and within this branch. I have Yellow, which is a harrowing, timely story, very tense and entertaining, but sort of thrilling in that way, and I do think that will resonate with members of the Academy. And then The Anne Frank Gift Shop, a funny name kind of a movie, and also is kind of a weird, strange, more of a comedy type of a film, so I think it will actually stand out from the other nominees and get it nominated. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do comment below. Let me know your thoughts on all the categories, your thoughts on my predictions. I'd love to hear in the comments down below. Like the video because this is the big one of the year. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And stay tuned to Tuesday, where I'm going to give a video of my live reactions on Oscar nominations. It's the best time of the year. Thanks for coming along all this way. And don't forget, I'm still going to be doing, predicting the Oscars once the nominations come out. So this channel will end after this. It's just probably the most fun time because the nominations are the hardest to predict in many ways. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.